Today's video features a paid partnership with BetterHelp. Okay, so we are quite a few years removed from the height of dark academia as a trend. Though its popularity has merely dwindled rather than evaporated entirely, academic aestheticism is still going pretty strong. From cluttered, dark academia photographs featuring desks decorated with candles and busts and torn pages of books pressed onto the adjoining walls, to white and minimalist study productivity aesthetics featuring customizable mechanical keyboards, morning lattes from the local coffee shop, and stationery pots filled with pastel highlighter pens, and of course, desk plants. Lots and lots of desk plants. When the trend started booming on Instagram, dark academia interested me the most, not only because it's somewhat aligned to my style, but because it heavily featured my two subjects, classics and literature. The dark academia hashtag is brimming with images of dusty books and classical symbolism, from copies of Homer's Iliad and Odyssey to busts of ancient Greek gods and goddesses, leather-bound notebooks and satchels, Michelangelo's David and copies of Donatar's Secret History. The New York Times described dark academia as a subculture with a heavy emphasis on reading, writing and learning, and traced its origins back to the mid-2010s on Tumblr, with a powerful resurgence in 2020 likely stemming from the study-from-home pandemic mandates. Millions of people around the world fell in love with the aesthetic of Gothic architecture, dark furniture, vintage tweed and worn leather accessories, and seemingly also the books that embodied the aesthetic, either as one of the many works of literature responsible for the trend's genesis, such as ancient Greco-Roman texts, Shakespeare and Dante, or texts which legitimised and depicted partakers of the aestheticism, known as campus novels. One would assume such a surge of interest in classical texts in particular, and ancient literature, and even ancient languages, would have translated to the real world, with more students applying to study the subject of classics, ancient history or archaeology, or even English literature at university. Yet sadly, despite the increase in aesthetic interest in the classics, the numbers applying to universities to study the subject are in decline. But before we go any further, I'd like to take a moment to thank today's paid partnership, which is BetterHelp. I've been using BetterHelp for coming up to 3 years now, and it's honestly completely life-changing. It is so important for me to have that weekly check-in with someone because I live alone, I don't really have much of a contact, and having the stress of my PhD as well as just running my own business technically as it is, even though it feels like it's just me flailing through life, it's really important for you to have someone to talk to. BetterHelp's mission is to make therapy as accessible as possible, and even when you finally get the confidence to go out and find a therapist, finding a good therapist can be really hard, but BetterHelp is a platform that makes it so easy to find a therapist. You don't have to search for hours or go through the internet or travel for support. It's entirely online and remote, and you can be matched with a credentialed therapist in as little as a few days after filling out a simple questionnaire. They match you based on your needs and the type of therapist you'd like, male, female, religious, non-religious, LGBTQI friendly. And with therapy, it's so personal. The relationship you have with a therapist, is essential. So you can swap therapists if you don't feel like you have a good match with the first time, or you can swap therapists if you need help in another area that they don't specialise in at no extra cost. So the 2 times I've signed up with BetterHelp, I've got off brilliantly with both of my therapists. They completely changed my life, and it's so important that I have that weekly connection. So whether you're suffering from depression and anxiety, or just going through a really difficult stage in life, or just need extra support, therapy can give you the tools that you need to live your life a different way. It's really easy to sign up and get matched with a therapist. There's a link in my description box down below. It is betterhelp.com/Cinzia, and clicking that link will support my channel, but also gives you 10% off your first month of BetterHelp, so you can connect with a therapist and see if it helps you. Looking specifically at the UK, the House of Commons published a higher education report in January 2024, which revealed that the biggest subject losers in higher education in 2020 were the arts and humanities, and universities have responded ruthlessly by closing down departments to match student interests. This isn't just a United Kingdom response. Since 2021, numerous classical programmes across the world have been closed or reduced. Howard University's Classics programme was closed in 2021, as was the Classics department of Roehampton University in the UK in 2022, along with its History, Drama, Creative Writing, Photography and Philosophy departments. In 2023, the Classics department, along with other language departments at the University of Vermont, were merged together to form a School of World Languages and Cultures within the College of Arts and Sciences. Sheffield University closed down its archaeology department in 2023, and the University of Gloucestershire has threatened to close all of its humanities departments. These aren't all, but the Classics at Risk Twitter account keeps an updated spreadsheet with all the institutions around the world threatening to remove or reduce the funding to classics and other humanities-related subjects. Classics is a pretty niche subject, I should know. I'm one of the students, and apparently I am but one of only 5,000 classics students in the UK, and that includes all levels of the degree, so it's not like it's just undergraduates, etc. However, more popular subjects, such as English literature, are also in decline. In 2021, only 7,045 students applied to study English literature in the University of the UK, which is a drop from the 10,740 students that applied to study it in 2012, meaning an interest in studying literature has gone down more than a third in less than a decade, despite internet trends suggesting otherwise. However, what's also important to highlight is that academic aestheticism is not just subject-bound. The most popular study tubers or studygram influencers are those attending prestigious universities such as Oxbridge or the Ivy League institutions in America. If you put Cambridge, Yale, Oxford or Harvard somewhere in your thumbnail or title, your content will attract more people than someone who doesn't, or rather technically can't. So to back up this theory, I calculated the median views for the first 10 videos that appeared when I searched the following titles on YouTube. Now, obviously, these median views are not static, trends change and things go up, but that's just a snapshot of the views that I was given when I searched those terms. Now, whilst Yale doesn't seem to be very popular, actually, sorry Yale, I don't know why that is, these median views show that public interest in academic lives hovers around the most elite institutions because of what they symbolise. The top institutions are renowned for housing the most academically gifted, hardworking and motivated students, and those who subscribe to the academic aesthetic also subscribe to the aesthetic of appearing intellectual. And what appears more intellectual than attending one of the world's top-ranking universities? Now, don't get it twisted. Before we get into this analysis, I need to stress that the students who attend these universities are incredibly intelligent, hardworking and inspirational, particularly the influencers, and that's not up for debate here. This is, however, an opportunity to analyse the public idolisation of these institutions and the people who attend them in a way which is entirely removed from academia itself, that being research results, research itself, academic accomplishments, and any shifts in the field of academia in their interested subject. You see, what this data can suggest, or what we can deduce from it potentially, is that students who attend these universities are more likely to find popularity and success online than those who don't, though most of their followers aren't interested in hearing about the person's research. Rather, they are more interested in seeing pretty photography and videos of old elusive hidden to the public libraries down the alleyways of Oxford and Cambridge. You see, followers aspire to be like the influencer at an elite institution not because of the person's research, but rather because they admire the person's position and status as a student at the institution. The audience's investment in academia is not in the research produced or the knowledge learned by the influencer, but in the aesthetics of learning and being seen as an intelligent person, and the highly elitist institutions are the ultimate symbols of academic superiority. Obviously, we have to acknowledge the reality, which is that the academic prowess of these elite institutions is built on hundreds of years' worth of privileged access to education, which was passed down and kept within family lineages only until the past real 30, 50 years. We've only really seen it become diversified in the past, 30, 20, maybe even less. It's still very limited, and those who previously got into these institutions tended to have academic resources and education opportunities due to their more privileged backgrounds. And I say that because whilst I'm feeling I'm stating the obvious, we have to acknowledge, and everyone's discussed this before, that academic aestheticism hides many of the truths about academia. I mean, one of these truths is that academic prowess and skill and talent is not exclusive to the students of these universities and these universities alone. And second is that not all students of these institutions are there for academic merit alone. It's a well-known secret that a generous donation from a family can buy students a place at an elite institution. Now, thankfully in the UK, we tend to be moving away from those days, with statistics revealing that state school students are more likely than private school students to get into Cambridge. In 2022, a proportion of places offered to state school students was 68% at Oxford and 72.5% at Cambridge, which almost a decade earlier, the numbers were very different. It was 57% and 61% respectively. However, keep in mind, whilst these numbers are very impressive, we must remember that 83% of all A-level students in the country go to state schools, and the post-university working world is far more primed for those from more privileged middle to upper class families and backgrounds. But let's talk about the Ivy League, because Ivy League elitism is no less in America. If anything, it is worse than the UK elitism right now. The grandparents, which lay the groundwork for its privileged tirade. I mean, let's state the obvious. American higher education has a much higher financial barrier to entry than those in the UK, and nepotism is a powerful force over there when it comes to elite institutions. So much so that familial wealth is an unofficial admission qualification. In 2023, a study on Ivy League colleges found that children whose parents made between $158,000 to $222,000 a year had the worst odds of acceptance, whilst those whose parents earned more than $611,000 a year were significantly overrepresented in Ivy League institutions, and this was largely thanks to nepotism. You see, many top-tier university colleges admit legacies, or students with a family connection to the university, at higher rates than other applicants. At Harvard, for example, the acceptance rate for legacy students is approximately 33% as compared to the overall acceptance rate of 6%. Among white applicants to Harvard in 2018, 21.5% had a legacy status, whereas only 6.6% of accepted Asian applicants and 4.8% of accepted African American applicants were of legacy status. And then you have athlete recruitment, which makes up approximately a quarter of admissions, with more studies out there showing that athletes tend to hail from high-income backgrounds as well. Now, there are so many more issues with the elitism of higher education and elite institutions overall that we could go into, but I bring these issues forward only to highlight the admiration of academia as an aesthetic over a practice. After looking at university application statistics and audience viewing trends, it wouldn't be too much of a stretch to posit the argument that there seems to be far more interest in looking and acting academically than in academia and research itself. And, of course, the looks and behaviours that people aspire to in the academic aesthetic are, as many have pointed out before, inherently entrenched in white and class elitist ideals and privilege. So what is this? Is this attraction to academia, particularly the humanities, a shallow and superficial indulgence rather than a sincere interest in studying these subjects? I mean, maybe. Likely, considering the whole move to aestheticism at all. Social media is entirely aesthetically driven. However, there's a chance that it goes much deeper than that. You see, there's a chance that people romanticize the arts, graze their fingertips over a copy of the Odyssey or Dante's Inferno that they'll never read, because of fear. Fear of unemployment and fear of wasting hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars or pounds on a subject that they can never pay the debt off of. When I discussed my regrets about doing my PhD in another video, I was surprised by how many people gave completely unprompted remarks about how much I was wasting my money and how I would never justify doing a PhD with the job prospects I would have after accomplishing it. As if I didn't already know that. You see, I never went into academia, or classics even, thinking I'd earn money because I had already somewhat of a fatalistic view of my future prospects regardless. You see, all of my interests until that point had destined me to financial mediocrity. You know, I either went into acting, or I went into art, or English literature and classics. None of which would have set me up for life, and I knew that going into it. And I came from a background where I had no family to rely on. I had no financial support. I came from a single unemployed mother who lived in Birmingham with no networks, no ties or financial security. I lost our home at 19. I had no home to return to after I graduated. Like, I was out of the door the second I graduated with a classics and literature degree. And I worked and studied as I went along the entire journey. And for me, studying was the hobby I supported with my income in the same way other people work to travel or work to save money for their hobbies, be that gaming or drinking, or work to save a deposit for a home. Academia is my hobby, not my job prospect, but I was lucky in that I went to university at a time when the government supported people from lower financial backgrounds going to university by giving me a full maintenance grant that's, covered my expenses for accommodation, at least. And also at a time when the fees were less than £4,000 a year to attend university, so my debt is much smaller. And I worked enough retail and freelance jobs over my 20s to pay off my master's debt and fully fund my own PhD myself, but I did so at a sacrifice. I never travelled in my 20s. I never went on holiday. I never learned to drive a car. I never went out. I never even drank alcohol for 7 of the years of my 20s. I never had any money to put down on a deposit for a home. And what inspired this video was when I first started, doing my PhD, people asked me to talk about it on YouTube, and originally I decided against it. Why, I thought to myself, would anyone want to watch me talk about academic experience? After all, I'm not smart enough to go to Oxbridge. I'm not that kind of academic. I'm not brilliant, and my daily life doesn't revolve around walking these old streets of Oxford and Cambridge, nestled away in the depths of a 200-year-old library. It's not aesthetic. It's ugly. It's just my flat. It's me in my flat. I never go anywhere. I have to work. I have to fund my own research. I don't have cohorts to hang out with. I can't afford to travel places and conduct research or visit different libraries because I have too many commitments at home. And I live alone. And I never leave my house anyway because I'm misanthropic and very socially anxious. So I never documented my PhD journey for the first 2.5 years because I accepted that I was not aesthetically tailored enough to entertain people or attract people. I rarely still don't consider myself worthy of calling myself an academic or even intelligent because I never got into those high-ranking universities. And I concluded, based on audience interests and trends, that others would see me the same way. And it's taken me over 2 years to realise that academic aestheticism played a role in my loss of confidence and ever-growing imposter syndrome. Though it's not exclusive, I should say, my inner dialogue is largely to blame for this. However, internet trends and popular students online, that kind of vibe, made me question my abilities as a student and my potential to be successful at what was my passion and financially ruinous hobby. And whilst there are a lot of issues regarding the romanticisation of academia online, such as trends like dark academia, whose foundations are firmly rooted and continue to be maintained by white upper-class privilege, I feel more can be said about the sad loss of the humanities overall. I feel like there is an unaddressed sadness in the dying arts and humanities as governments and universities alike pull the financial plug on them both, and the deeply human fear younger generations are facing with the ever-mounting debts, inflation, poor job prospects and capitalistic drive, which is potentially forcing them away from subjects that they would love to study just to survive and get through the next 40 years by the tips of their fingertips with retirement never on the horizon. And as the capitalists push us further away from books, art, philosophy, literature and history, people become more and more removed from discussions about what it means to be human, aside from how much you earn, how popular you are, and what it means to live and what it means to enjoy life on this short mortal coil that we inhabit. But what do I know? I'm just an unemployable humanities student. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little mini essay. Thank you so much for my Patreons for making this possible. And if you liked it, please consider liking and subscribing. If you have any similar video requests, there is always a Google form in the description box down below that you can use. Thank you so much again for watching, and I will see you soon for another video. And remember, books save lives, so keep reading.